Hey guys, I'm going to run you through a very quick tutorial on how I process an image. So we're going to start with this one, and I'm in Lightroom, and this is a hard image to expose because the dog is white. I have it in a very dark background. So we're going to even that out a little bit with your exposure controls over here. So I'm going to take, weirdly, down the highlights, up the shadows, and I'm going to bring the exposure up a little bit just because I still want a white dog, but I don't want those whites to blow out. And I want to see some of the detail in the background behind what we have going here. Bring that down just a pinch. Great. And I am going to warm it up just a little as well. I want the dog is a little bit white, but a little bit of brown in the dog as well. And this was taking it a little bit blue just with the reflection of all of the greens here. It was going a little bit blue. I needed to warm it up. I'm going to take up the clarity a bit. You can see how that's just going to make it a little crunchier, and a tiny bit of the dehaze as well. And then I don't want to forget the texture. I like my images to be a little crunchy. Again, this is just how I do things, but you can 100% just do it to whatever your taste is. I'm going to bring those shadows down just a little. I like a little bit of contrast. Bring up the whites. And that looks good to me. I'm really looking at the dog itself and how crispy I want the dog to be and what I want that exposure on the dog to be, because I will be compensating for some of the background around, and I'm going to add in, a little bit of haze and a little bit of blur, and you'll see how I do all of that when I take it into Photoshop. Most of the time you can do a lot of the different processes that I do in Photoshop. You can also do in Lightroom. I just have been on Photoshop doing my processing for 25 years, and so I'm very comfortable in that interface, and I feel like I have more control. I'm also in Lightroom Classic, but there are a bunch of tools up here that you can use. If you're more used to Lightroom and you do your processing in Lightroom, there's a million things you can do here. I just feel like for the way I do things, I have more control in Photoshop. So that is basically the conversion with the exposure compensations. And then I crop everything to a 5:7 crop. It just is my preferred aspect ratio. It's what I like. I'm going to put the dog for this particular image right as a center composition. So now that we have this image exported from Lightroom and it is in Photoshop, I'm going to run you through what I would do to it to add that magic fairy dust that I do to all my images before the client sees them. Now, I do this at different levels depending on the image. Usually the level that I'm going to show you is what I would do to about 10 images, give or take, in the client's show, the ones I'm in love with that I really want that client to purchase. I say the ones I want to make sing. So I'm going to run you through that. It's a little bit more than I would do to everything. I do pre-touch everything before the client sees it, just because I feel like it ups my sales and that the clients don't really have the imagination to understand what this image is going to really look like when it's finished. And a lot of my clients do albums, so they are purchasing 30 images anyway, out of like 40 to 60 quite often. Or if they're not doing an album, a lot of them are doing image boxes, which is anywhere between 10 and 18 images. So I don't feel like it is a ton of wasted work. And usually they will almost always choose the ones that I have decided to edit to this further degree. So I'm going to go through the image first and get rid of any distractions that may be. I'm going to get rid of the leash. I'm seeing a little bit of a white patch in here, a couple of these stray sticks or leaves or anything like that is drawing my attention, like these light plants down in the corner. So I'm just going to use the AI tools. For the most part, I will use the this little remove tool, which is underneath the patch tool on your palette over here. And it's made it super easy to just take that and go over little areas that you want to remove. Now, I have changed the settings to this tool so that it will not do remove until I hit return. So I'm able to go through and just grab all of the little areas that I want to remove at one time, rather than like it taking the time to do this every time I let go of the cursor. So I'm going to go throughout my image and just get rid of all of these little things. And it does a pretty good job of like figuring out the background and cloning things appropriately. So I'm just going through and I'm going to just look for any little areas that are going to drive me crazy and stick out. Any little bright spots, any little distractions. And you can make your brush bigger or smaller just by hitting the bracket keys so that you're able to get a pretty good selection around anything there. And I'm just, some of these things I just know are going to drive me crazy later, so I'm just going to get rid of them now. And you won't notice it once you're gone. It just kind of puts your eyes at ease not to be distracted by these little things. Okay, then I'm going to hit return and all of those will go away at once. Just takes a minute. Or my computer's slow. Could be either way. Okay, so let me just show you. That's a quick and easy process. So let me show you, this was before and this is after. Just a very quick cleanup. There may be a few other little things once you zoom out that you want to remove. So I'm going to do some of those that will drive me crazy. And some of these will also kind of disappear once we do further editing to the image. We're going to add in some dodging and burning and some color hazing, etc. So just further distractions here. There we go. That looks pretty good. So one thing that I do different than a lot of other photographers do is I use snapshots and history brushing a lot. So snapshot is over here on your history, or not your history palette, but yeah, in your history palette, sorry. And it's just a little camera icon. And so what that does is it actually just takes a little picture of wherever you are in your process. And you're able to actually paint from that picture if you want to. And that information will come in handy in a little bit, and I'll explain everything a little bit further. But for now, it just has taken a picture at this current state of where we're at. So this was, oops, let's go back to just our original crop. And took another picture because I did crop it once again, because when it output it didn't crop correctly. So this is our initial image, and then this is where we're at. Okay, so what we're going to do then is we are going to do a little bit of a dodging burning scenario here. So I'm just going to take my burn tool. I always like to do the burning first. And I'm going to just burn in these lighter spots and just create a vignette so that dog really pops out of the images. And you don't want a halo, so you might want to make your brush smaller and go into some of these areas. Great. And I'm just dodging. I dodge and burn at high percentages just because I don't want to go over things 14 times. So I'm going like 70%. I'm doing the midtones. Great. I'm going to take another snapshot. And so again, just for the record, this is where we started and this is where we are very quickly. I'm then going to do a little bit of a dodge to kind of add in that light leak or lens flare haze that I do in a lot of my images. This is a very simple process. I'm just going to be in dodge, in shadow mode, and I'm just going to go over a corner just to add a little bit of a haze here. That's a lot of a haze, but I did it at a high percentage, but then I'm just going to hit Command Shift F and fade it a little bit. I just have a little bit more control if I do it that way. Okay, so that makes me happy. I'm going to take another snapshot. I do this a lot. So here's where we started, here's where we are. Now that is about what I would do to the bulk of the images that I'm going to show a client. It's enough that they get the idea. It's enough that they can kind of see more than what I'm getting versus what they could get themselves on their phone. It does add a little bit of fairy dust. What I'm going to do from here on is those extra steps that really sell this particular image. I am seeing a little bit of the spotty light on the dog. I want to take some of those away just because they're just a little bit distracting. And they're kind of driving me nuts because they're just bringing my eye to that part of the dog. And it doesn't really matter. We just don't really need to see it. So let's get rid of it. And yes, I do realize that this image is a little bit grainy in the shadow areas because we did bring those shadows up. That's okay. I am going to run a little bit of denoise on it with Topaz AI. Just because it was the exposure that I needed to do and the ISO that I needed for the light on the day. So Topaz AI is a great tool. It is going to bring everything in the face into a little bit more sharpness, and it's going to get rid of the artifacting and the grain a little bit in the background. I'll show you that in a bit. So I have taken another snapshot just so that you can see what I've done on the dog itself. So this was the original. This is where we're at just on how the dog looks here. I am then going to use the history brush a bit in screen mode to really bring out this dog's eye color and those highlights in the eyes, and possibly even changing some of the color where it's going into shadow here into blues more on the legs. So I'm going to warm that up a little bit. I'm going to do all of that with history brushing. So history brushing is an interesting tool that not a lot of photographers use. And basically it allows you to brush from any of your snapshots. Snapshots are not a layer. They're just a time in history, but you can kind of almost use them as layers, and I find it to be more organic and more intuitive than doing different adjustment layers, etc. So I'm going to place the history brush next to the little square next to the snapshot of where I am and where I like it. And this is, I'm going to be painting from this snapshot. So we're going to do the color adjustment to the body first. So I'm going to just go in and do a hue and saturation. No, I lied. I'm not going to do a hue and saturation. Sorry. I'm going to do a color balance because that's what I said I was going to do. And I'm just looking at this area of the dog, and I want that to just be a little bit warmer. Because it's gone cool in the shadow. So I'm going to make it a little bit yellow and a little bit red. I'm overdoing it a bunch, but you'll understand in a minute. Okay, and I'm just clicking OK. And then because my history brush is next to that snapshot, I actually want to move it. I want to take a new snapshot. My dog is barking in the background. I'm going to take a new snapshot, move that history brush. So basically, I'm going to paint from this warmer image back to this cooler image with the history brush. I'm going to be in normal mode, and let's put it up about 45%, give or take. I'm going to make that smaller, and then I can just paint that color. It's pretty subtle, But because I'm doing it as a 45%, I can paint it in layers and do it little bits at a time. Can also do that with some saturation, all that fun stuff. So now let's do it with some saturation, because I am getting a little bit of color casting from the green. So you can either use your regular desaturation brush, or you can do it in history brushing again. So I'm going to take another snapshot because I like it now. And then I'm going to just desaturate the yellows a bit. And you can see that made everything warmer. I'm really just looking in this shadow area of the dog. And I am going to make those yellows just a little bit brighter. You can see with my sliders what's happening here. I don't want to do it a lot, just a little bit. And then you can also history brush from a history state onto a snapshot. So if I move my history brush right here, this was the hue and saturation thing that I just did, and I can then go and just click on the last history state that I was on, use that history brush and paint in that more desaturated color just to get rid of some of that casting from the green grass, which we all get. So there we go. And take another snapshot. You can see just how often I do this. I'm already up to snapshot 8. The great thing about using snapshots and not layers is it doesn't take any additional memory. It doesn't make your file size any bigger like it does when you add in layer after layer after layer. So I'm going to be here on my last snapshot. I'm going to put my history brush there. I'm going to zoom in because I'm going to brighten those eyes a little bit. And then what I'm going to do there is history brush, but I'm going to change it to screen mode. I'm going to take that opacity down to about 20%, give or take. And then I'm just going to go over these eyes, and it is just going to brighten them up. I just did an overall. And don't worry, I will show you the before and after. And I'm going over anywhere that the light naturally touches. I want to see the color of this dog's eyes. The great thing about doing it in screen mode is that it is not really going to change those deep tones much. You can always hit them with a little bit of a burn if you want to. So I'm also going to take the blue out of these eyes a little bit. I'm just going to do that with my regular desaturate brush. I'm going to bring that down. And yes, I know my focus just is a little bit soft, but we are really zoomed in here and it won't really matter. And then I'm just going to darken the darks a little bit just with a regular burn tool. You can also use history brush in multiply mode to hit your darks, but burn works as well. And then I'm also going to go back to the history brush and I'm just going to hit the places on the dog's body and face of where the light naturally hits. So we're going to do that a little bit lower on like a 15%. And anywhere where the light is hitting, I just want to pump those highlights just a pinch. It's not going to blow them out. It's just going to add in a little bit of brightness. And like I said, I will show you this as a before and after in just a minute. All these little folds of the fur. All of this in here. I just want to brighten this pup up a little bit. And I might even go into the shadows just a little bit because I just want him to really stand out. And all the way down through here. Okay, so the moment of truth. I'm going to take another snapshot. Okay, go back up to them. This is where we were. And this is just what we did with that history brushing. Once you get used to doing this, it becomes very intuitive and very, very quick. I usually don't spend more than 2 or 3 minutes, even on those images that I'm really making shine for a client to purchase. Okay, so this is where we are at. Let me show you where we have started. And like I said, I would do this all in a matter of 2 to 3 minutes. So this was image straight out of camera, this is where we currently are at. Again, this is going to be something that really makes your client love this image. It's going to look like there's fairy dust sprinkled on it. We're going to take it one step further, and I'm going to add in just some color blur, just so that you really come into the dog's face right now. So what I'm going to do is we are going to add a layer. I know I'm using a layer, crazy. And I'm going to select a green color, just kind of a mid-tone green here. And we're going to use the brush. And on this new layer, I am going to just paint some of this color around the dog. I almost want it to look like depth of field. It's going to go more color out to the edges. Don't worry about how thick it is at this moment, because we are going to change some of this. Especially make it super colorful and dense around the edges. I am painting in color at actually about 90%, but you can kind of see that it does. I'm going to take that percentage down a little bit to 50% and do some of this that's a little bit closer into the pup. And you can see that it's kind of like a gradual density out to the edges. And then I'm going to actually burn that color so it does vignette and go darker, a real deep green all the way out to the edges. Again, this is a lot. We're not going to leave it like this. So you can kind of see how that is going into a subtle vignette of color all the way out to the edges. And then I am, because we had put that brightness up in this corner, I am gonna like make that bright again up there. Then I'm gonna take this whole layer and I'm going to just change the opacity until it's what I want. That's kind of pretty right there. I like that, so I'm going to flatten it. And shocking, I'm going to take another snapshot. Okay, so this is where we started. This was before the color, and then this was just adding in a little bit of that color haze. I'm going to take this one step further and I'm going to soften this and really bring out the dog. So let's crunch up the dog a little bit more. And I'm not sure if you knew this, but you can now take these images from Photoshop and go back into Camera Raw filters. So we're going to go and grab filters and go to Camera Raw filters. And I'm going to go and give it effects and give it a little bit more clarity. I'm just concerned about the dog. This stuff is all going to go into even more of a haze in a minute. I'm just looking at making this dog super crunchy. Okay, so that is good. You can see here, so this was before that. Let me come in so you can see a little bit more. And then this was after, so you can see how he's getting just a little bit more sharp. Okay, I'm going to go back to the one before I made the dog sharper because I have a snapshot of that. And I'm going to do a soft light glow on the back of this image. Now I have this set up as an action that duplicates the image twice, adds a Gaussian blur on one, and then on two of them actually, and then changes the layer mode to a soft light layer. It's a big complex thing. I'm not going to walk you through that. But I am just going to run it. And there we go. It can be adjusted as needed, but basically I will show you what that has done with a before and after. So there's before, there's after. It just deepens everything and makes it super soft. Now, everything is super soft. The dog is a little bit softer than I want, but you remember I crunched him up. So this was the image where he was crunchy. And then I'm going to go ahead and paint him onto the crunchy version. Okay, so I'm going to go into History Brush, take it off screen because that's what we did with the eyes, go back to normal. I'm going to bring it all the way up to 100%. And I'm just going to paint that back on just over the dog. And I'm not going to do it all the way to the edges. I'm just going to do on the important parts of the dog. And that is pretty beautiful. Okay, so I'm just going to show you. This is where we started. And this is where we are. Really pretty. And then the last thing that you can do to get rid of some of this, like I would show this as a client as is and then not run the rest until I am sending it to order, but you can do Topaz. I have a bunch of them. Photo AI is my favorite because it does all of the different things in one app. You can put it in as a Photoshop filter. It does take a little bit of time to load, as you can see, but it is going to give you a bunch of different tools, and it's going to give you suggestions here. I usually don't use upscale. I don't really need to go upscale. I mean, my clients usually, I have sold one, but usually they're not doing 40 by 60 wall portraits, anything like that. So all I'm going to do is usually the denoise a little bit. You can change the strength of that. And then I will also do a little bit of sharpening. It does do it quite a bit. I'm going to bring that down a little bit. I don't think I really need to do a lens blur or motion blur one. That's too much. So I'm going to go back to standard here, take the strength down because I just need a tiny bit. And I am going to fade that once it exports, and then just export it to Lightroom. And it'll show up. It does it all within the app. And I will just zoom in so that you can see what that has done. You will get a little bit of artifacting, so I do want to fade that because I don't like what it always does to the fur. So I'm going to fade it to about here. But what I'm actually going to do, and I like that it has gotten rid of the noise in the background, but it gives me too much artifacting on the fur. So this was before, and then this was after. So in the fur here, I'm going to take my history brush back to the before, take it, and we are going to just give me that face fur back. We'll history brush it back like 70%, just to get rid of these lines that it has created in here. Because all I really want is those eyes and things in focus. That's all that matters. So we soften that up a little bit. 70% seems to be a little too much, so we're going to fade that. We'll go about 50%. Okay. And that was zoomed in super tight. A client's never going to zoom in quite that far. So there is what I would show a client. So all the way back to original, and here's that result. Now, it took me a longer time than it would if I were doing this in real life, because I do all this very, very quickly, but you can see I would not spend more than a couple of minutes on this. But I would do this somewhere between 5 to 10 images, the ones I really want them to buy. And when you make it this pretty, it's really hard for a client to say no to that. So amazing. I hope that helps. And hopefully I will also do more of these. So thanks so much. Bye-bye.